Catholic Views, where we get to know the faith and those who live it. I'm your host, Casey Bassett, filling in for Renee as she is out. We're joined today by Jason and Barb Stangeland. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason and Barb have joined us today to, first of all, kind of talk about their faith growing up, but also mainly to talk about TEC, which is it's not a new initiative, but it's something that's coming back into our diocese as an opportunity for young people to really experience Christ. So Jason and Barb have both had some great experiences with TEC, both as participants, but also as leading TEC Encounter Weekends. So I think the first place we should probably start is maybe just, as you're growing up, what role did the Catholic faith play in your lives growing up? And then we'll move into sort of how TEC kind of came to impact your lives as well. So
I'll start. It was something that we did. It was expected to go to Mass. And just for a little bit of background, I grew up in Brookings. My mom is Catholic. My dad is Methodist, and so he would actually go to us to the Catholic Mass, as well as going to his own services, and so that made an impact for me. But beyond just we went to Mass and I went to religious ed. It wasn't necessarily a part of my everyday life. It wasn't something that was always on my mind. Certainly, I did not have any kind of. I had a lot of head knowledge, maybe, but not a lot of heart knowledge and relationship with Christ growing up.
Sure.
I would say.
Sure.
And I grew up in Florence, which is up by Watertown.
Oh,
and I have 7 brothers and sisters, kind of all different ages. There's 19 years between the oldest and youngest.
Okay.
We too were, we went to church every Sunday with our parents and religious ed on Wednesday nights. And, we knew about the faith, but we didn't, there wasn't any particular practices we did all the time at home, like praying the rosary. We did that occasionally during
Sure.
Lent or Advent, would pray the rosary with the KWAT rosary
yes,
radio.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something that we lived every day besides, meal prayers at home kind of thing. And so that was kind of our growing up.
Okay. So let's move into TEC then. I want to kind of first set the stage because we had a conversation before we started here about what TEC was and sort of its history in the diocese. But I think a lot of young people today, especially in our diocese, may not have heard of it, may not know about it. So let's kind of start with, first of all, what does TEC stand for? And then we'll move into maybe your experiences with TEC.
When we were participating in TEC, or Prairie TEC was what it was called in the diocese, it was Teens Encounter Christ. That was the title. The new program that's coming to our diocese that's starting here in August will be East River Together Encounter Christ, to be more open to all ages type thing.
Sure.
Although the focus of Together Encounter Christ will still be that junior, senior in high school, college age. That's kind of what the program was created to be. It was meant to be kind of those people who are in transition. Juniors and seniors are starting to look at colleges. Then college students are starting to look at life beyond school. And so it's kind of a time of transition. So, and it's an experience to encounter Christ in a special way through the Paschal mystery of dying, rising, and going.
Sure.
And so if you think of the road to Emmaus and where Jesus is having that conversation, it talks about the disciples, where are not our hearts burning within us? That's, to me, that's what ultimately the TEC experience is about. Or in John's Gospel, I want to say it's early on, Jesus, they ask him about where are you staying, and Jesus says, come and see. And so that's what I would say to anybody listening who's like, should I go make a TEC? I would say, come and see.
Okay.
Would be my advice, encouragement to them.
Sure. And I guess when I was growing up, when I was very young, my encounter or my knowledge of TEC was just that Teens Encounter Christ. That's what I knew about it. And I might throw a little curveball at you just for curiosity. Did TEC start in our region? Was it a Wisconsin area, Michigan?
Father Fedewa discerned and began the program in Michigan.
In
Lansing, Michigan.
Yeah. Okay.
And he gathered a team of other, I believe it was priests and nuns, think
Sounds right.
I'm trying to think of her. I can't think of her name, but there was a nun who helped him get it started, and they created it and started having weekends, and then it started to spread, much like the Curcio movement and the Koinonia movement. It spread from there to other dioceses, and then the National TEC organization was created, and I want to say, I'm not really sure what the time frame is on. They discern what parts really should be in the manual, because as you know, when you have movements like this, they spread throughout the country, and then this tech center decides this talk should be taken out and this should be put in. And so tech decided that, okay, we need to create a standard manual that these are the things that we've discerned need to be as part of the weekend.
Okay.
So they have what's called a scope and sequence. This talk goes here, this talk goes here, and that shouldn't change because that's how it's meant to flow.
Sure, I see.
And so they started that probably, I want to say about 30 years ago, discerning what needed to be in a weekend.
Okay.
And so Tech Conference has trademarked their name and this manual, and it was presented to Pope John Paul, and he put his stamp of approval on it, and so it's spread all over the country from there. And like I said, with the new manual, each tech center had to look at where maybe they had strayed from from what was in the original program that Father Fedua created.
I see. I had the opportunity to meet Father Fedua. He was a seminary formator for a little while, and I had forgotten until you just mentioned that his involvement with tech. He was a wonderful man, and I was lucky to get to meet him. So let's move into as participants in tech, because I know there's a stage at which you both became leaders for the weekends. But as participants, what was your first encounter with tech? What did it look like? And what were some of the fruits or things that you brought away from it? And then what encouraged you to sort of come back to it?
Well, for me, my first tech weekend was when I was 16. We were requested to make a retreat at that time for confirmation. And tech was the one that was in our area, because I was near Watertown. And so, and I have 4 siblings older than me, and they had all made tech prior to this. So, that was just kind of okay, when you're 16, you get to go to tech.
Sure. And this was Prairie Tech, right?
This was Prairie Tech, yes. And so I went and made my first weekend and just fell in love with the people and the experience. And each weekend is different. So you can go on East River Tech 1, and East River Tech 10 will be a totally different experience because of the people who are part of the weekend. It's got the same format, but it's different people, so you're going to hear different stories, you're going to hear different experiences. Things might be done just a little bit different. So it's always, each weekend you need to come in and go, this is going to be totally different than the last one, and you can't expect the same things to happen.
Interesting. That's actually one of my other questions, and we'll go into it later, and I'm excited to hear about it now, is kind of what a weekend looks like. And it really sounds like the people there are really what make the weekend. It's less formal and more experiential, maybe, is what I would say. But
yes.
We'll get into it. I'll let you answer that instead of me speculating. So, Jason, what about your experience?
For me, my very first tech experience would have been when I think it was when I was a senior in high school, and it wasn't a requirement that I go, but I went with a group of friends, and we were talking beforehand. Barb found a picture has a picture that she and one of her friends got together that we would get on the weekend, and she had all the names written down of everybody, and there are some gaps in there. There were 4 names that aren't listed, and that would be Jason, John, Angie, and Amy, and those were the people that I went with. So I obviously did not make much of an impression on her at that time. And in all honesty, my heart was not really super open to that encounter, or not ready for it, however you want to look at it. for a variety of reasons. I have a good friend who says a lot of people will miss heaven by about a foot. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? It's like the distance from their heart to their head. So I had a lot of head knowledge about the church, but not a lot of heart knowledge. And for me, I think that was a seed that had planted. So when I look back on that, I'm like, do I wish I would have had a better experience? Probably. But what was important is that was like, had I not done that weekend, I couldn't have later on made another TEC weekend. And if I fast forward, and this is getting a little bit ahead, but it's getting into kind of our roles as leaders, is I had some students when I taught in Elkton who had made TECs, and they said, oh, you need to go on one of these. I'm like, well, I think I actually went on one of those a long time ago. So I'm like, okay, well, I need to be on the team. And was living in Brookings, teaching in Elkton, and I at the Newman Center there at SDSU, they had applications for TECites, who were the kind of the new people, new retreatants that would attend, but they didn't have a team one. So I got one of those, I filled it out and just said, here's my story, a little bit about this and what it is that you want me to do. And the coordinators at that time, Tim and Liz Lorang, I will always be grateful for this. I don't know if they knew this. If I told them, I probably should have. But I'm so grateful that they took this person who hasn't been here in forever and said, okay, yeah, you can come and you'd be on the prayer team for that weekend. And that's really where I had my first encounter experience. And so it got me more involved, really lit that fire from there on.
So your first powerful experience was as a leader in a TEC weekend?
Not even so much as a leader, but so one of the things you do is there's a prayer team.
Okay.
And I want to say when Bishop Dudley, Barb said this, when Bishop Dudley brought the program to our diocese, one of the things that he had felt was really important is that they have is prayer and the Blessed Sacrament, and so that's available for the prayer team has access to pray for the TECites. We call it, one of the symbols of TEC is wheat. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains a single grain. And so we'd call that, praying for someone, whether you're on the team or, someone who's made a TEC and there are other TECs, is to offer wheat or to pray for them, make sacrifices.
Sure.
So, we plant the seed, we pray that soil in their heart, whatever is open to the messages that they have, and then it's like, well, then it's up to the Holy Spirit to take it from there.
Okay. And Barb, you had obviously a powerful first experience. Did you go back as a participant then, or did you step into that sort of?
So once you've been a participant, then you become a team member,
Oh,
and there's
okay.
different roles within the team. So some roles are like a resource, which is a table leader. So you have a group of other new TECites who you kind of lead through the weekend for discussions and those kind of things. There's also a musician. There's also, adult team that might just be doing some of the errands around getting things ready. There's a lay director who's kind of the person who directs the weekend and keeps everybody on task at, time wise. And then they have an assistant. And then of course there's a spiritual director, which is always a priest, and then an assistant spiritual director to help with the lay liturgies and those kind of things. Okay. So there's different roles that you can come back at. Most people don't go back and be a TECite again.
Okay.
So you come back as a team member.
So that's interesting. So that's a little different than what we would think, like decamp and whatnot, because a lot of those kids come back year after year as participants.
But once you've participated, then you become a team member. You come back in a capacity of supporting or learning or teaching kind of thing. And so like on this weekend that Jason came on, I was what they called a prairie dog or a gopher. So the lay director could send me to go get something.
Oh, okay.
Or, go get something from the chapel or get something from the conference room if we were in the chapel. So they're just different roles. And as you do those different roles, then of course the leadership, the coordinators get to know you, and then eventually you get asked into the leadership of like assistant lay director and lay director, those kind of things.
Okay.
And then also you would be like, as you're observing those things, like, okay, this person's had these experiences, they really feel comfortable sharing those things, they might give a talk. And there are different talks and different people assigned to those talks. And someone's like, one of them is always the spiritual director, always the priest, gives what's called the metanoia talk, which is about turning your heart around. But different people, again, will give different talks depending on their stages in life. Some are specifically for a young person to give, some are for more adult team, more, just have experienced more things, more ups and downs in their faith.
Okay. So we're kind of jumping into the leadership where you guys kind of transitioned into that coordinator and whatnot. Let's talk about what that looked like as you progressed towards, the, I don't want to say higher leadership in Prairie Tech, but further along. And then also how you two actually met, because that happened at a tech, kind of came to fruition, culmination at a tech gathering. So why don't we start with maybe what it looked like after you started that coordinator role, Barb, and then also Jason as the prayer leader, what came next after that for the next tech, and then what that looked like.
Well, so when I came back and worked on the prayer team, what really hit me was like, here are these people who don't know me, and I have all my little quirks and oddities that I presume most people do, but they just sort of accepted me as I was, and that started to get me to realize that's how God sees us, is to accept us where we are, and just gave me a new relational experience. And so I don't even know the numbers. I probably did several texts in a row. It would have been better to not, sometimes that can be not healthy, but just getting into the different roles and doing the different things that I did. And at some point, what ended up happening, and maybe I'm jumping ahead again, but the people who were the coordinators stepped aside to spend more time raising their family, and they were looking for somebody in the diocese to do that. And I was in the diocese. I didn't have, Barb has way more tech knowledge than I do, but she wasn't in the diocese at the time. And I hadn't really thought of it. It's not something like, oh, I'm striving for this, but this was back in the days when email was starting to, at least to me, was gain popularity, and so late 90s. And I had 2 or 3 people say, you should think about this coordinator role. Maybe you should be the coordinator role. I'm like, okay, God, all right, I'll think about it. But we ended up coordinating from a distance.
Because I was in the Twin Cities. That's where I worked at the time. So I was coming back for weekends because, well, it's my home diocese, that kind of thing. But I lived in the Twin Cities area.
Okay.
And then when you would come, when Barb would come back, she would be coming back to visit her, be with her family in Florence. And so, that's only an hour from Brookings, which is where I was living at the time. And so we would have to get together and discuss whatever things were going on. And I'm sure
discuss who's going to be on the next team, who's going to pick up this item for the kitchen, coordinate those kind of things. That's kind of what the coordinators do, is they organize the team, they organize, getting supplies to the weekend, they make sure the buildings that we need are planned out, register, we've talked to the parish to say, can we use your building this weekend? And that's all okayed. So that's kind of what the coordinators do. And then there was, like I said, we would get together when I'd come back to South Dakota, but we also spent a lot of time on the phone, because he would just give me a call and say, hey, I have a question about this. Do you know where we get the tech crosses from? Do you know where we do this? That kind of thing. So we just spent a lot of time.
And so, when I talk to somebody on the phone, I'm just like, okay, what do we need to do? Let's do this. Let's do that. It's just like, I don't generally have long, extended conversations on the phone. And we've talked about this. That's one of the things that really drew me to Barb, was like, I could sit and have a conversation with her, kind of like the conversation we're having now, that I normally don't do that on the phone with anybody. And so it just sort of was organically, although this is kind of funny. I think this needs to be shared, that we did have dating advice that we asked each other about, but not about each other. So there was someone I was interested about. I don't even remember what the questions were, and there was someone she was interested in, and so we asked each other advice, from the other gender's perspective, and
obviously our advice worked really well.
Terrible advice, apparently.
That's really funny. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Barb and Jason Stangeland here on Catholic Views about their experiences with TEC, and they just sort of detailed how they kind of came together and formed a relationship, basically as co-coordinators for TEC. So I'd like to jump into what a typical TEC weekend looks like, because it's deliberately set up, sort of theologically set up, to really move a person through a spiritual journey. So whoever wants to start with that.
So the first thing is we do want to emphasize they will feed you on the weekend. So there is food there, but it's really the kind of really the central events, I would say, of the church, particularly the of the Passion of Christ. So the first day is called Die Day, and there's a really, I think, good description in the most recent Bishop's Bulletin if people want to look at that as well. But so Die Day is when we really look, what are the things that are holding us back? What are the things that I have to die to, things that I have to give up in my life to grow closer to Christ? And that would be the first day. Anymore on Die Day, or otherwise I'll give you the.
And then Rise Day is taking us into Jesus' resurrection, and the talks are centered around rising in Christ and his love for us. And then the last day is Go Day, so that would be more like a Pentecost. So we're being called to leave this community and go share our faith and our encounter with Christ with others.
Okay. And so throughout each day, you had kind of mentioned this before, but there's different talks that are given and sort of testimonies. But also you mentioned music, a music coordinator. So what are some of the particular activities that sort of happen throughout each day that move the participants along?
Well, we do the meditations, and then usually there's time for discussion of that meditation at your table. We take breaks and do some fun activities like games in the gym, those kind of things. Of course, food is essential, because you get to meet other people while you're eating and things like that. So that's a central part. There's different liturgies, paraliturgies throughout the weekend. This weekend is a Catholic movement. So, you're going to have reconciliation, you're going to have Mass, you're going to have the sacraments available to you. There are, just to put it this out there are some TEC centers in our diocese that are interdenominational. So be sure when you're signing up for a TEC weekend that you're getting to a Catholic retreat if you are Catholic. What else do I want to say about that?
About what? Just signing? Yeah, just make sure. I mean, and I've not been to those. I mean, I'm sure they're wonderful. But if you're looking for the sacraments, if you're looking for reconciliation, if you're looking for the Eucharist, that's Prairie TEC, or there are other, like 3 weekends ago now, I think I participated in a Riverbend TEC, which was in New Ulm. They have different places, but there are other TECs that are Catholic TECs, in the area. And if you're again listening from somewhere else, you're more than welcome to
come to East River
TEC
Sure.
in Watertown. Yes.
Sure. We have just a couple minutes left, but I want to get two questions in. The first, if you have a particularly powerful experience that you witnessed or experienced during your time in TEC that sticks out in your minds, and then second, with TEC returning to the diocese, I wanted to get your thoughts on and hope for the future of TEC.
For me, that's kind of, as I was thinking about that, that's really kind of wrapped into one. I never had, other than that second retreat that I went on, that I just sort of started to understand how Christ loves me. But one of the things is we don't know, last weekend's gospel was about the seeds being planted. It doesn't say anything about how long it takes them to grow. And for me, it took a long time. But the other thing is, from the TECs that we coordinated and that we were involved in prior to coordinating, there were a lot of people that we got to know. Some of them became priests. Father Sean Haggerty is one who's the spiritual director now. Father Anthony Irwin was another one who was like one of our kids. Remember him growing up. A couple of sisters, but just a lot of holy vocations. And when it really hit me, and this is where, for me, the powerful experience was this summer, I was taking our daughter to the Maria Goretti Vocations Camp, and when I got there, there was a girl that they saw, and she and her friend from Aberdeen were like so excited to see her. And then I walking in, I saw a mom there who was picking up her daughters, and this was someone that I hadn't seen in like 10 years from the Newman Center. And then when I got there were all a bunch of these other girls who were daughters of people who made TECs.
Sure.
And so to see, like that seed that was planted in them that many years ago, now that's continuing with their children. And just, I mean, there's so many times this has come up, like, oh, we're doing this thing, and oh, well, I know that person, they're from TEC. And so for me, that's been the most powerful experience, is that encounter that we have, that we don't see that fruit till years later. And
Sure.
And again, for me, then that's also my hope, is that we have a new generation that starts having that happen as well.
We got about a minute left, Barb. Do you have anything to add to that?
Just the encounters of other people and seeing Christ through them. I mean, these people have been our supporters through our marriage even, like when we have a question about raising children, we might reach out to our friends, the Steins, because they're older and have, grown kids, and they give some really good advice, and so it's that encounter of Christ within others.
Sure.
So.
Well, Jason and Barb, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. And for the listeners out there, East River TEC, so TEC is coming back. It's called East River TEC. And Jason had mentioned there is an article in the Bishop's Bulletin this last month kind of detailing what that looks like, and has some contact information, I believe, in it. So if you're interested in it, be sure you're following us on our channels or reading the Bishop's Bulletin and staying alert, and we'll have more information coming out on that soon. So again, I thank you both for coming in today and talking to us about this. It's been great.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
For more information about the diocese, visit our website at sfcatholic.org. You can also visit us on Facebook and Instagram. That's it for us today. Join us again next time for more Catholic Views.